You're listening to The Adventuring Party, talking about gaming the Irish way.
Welcome to the party. I'm Warlord Scarr, absolute enemy of all hated wizards, and truster only in the truest of darkened steel.
And I'm Dave, who's partial to the odd magic using character.
Oh, you aren't they nice? But according to many a lamenting GM and internet commentator, is the entire concept of magic. And it needs to be corralled and beaten into shape and rebalanced and take out fireball and all of this stuff. In many an RPG, you find some system of superpowers or psychic abilities or just plain spells, and it'll inevitably eat up like 30% of the book, and there'll be one or two spells that just absolutely shatter the game balance. And why can't we figure this out? Why is this so hard to do? And I thought it would be a good topic to think about the reasons that balancing spells is a little bit harder than it seems.
Yeah, there's there's a lot to a magic system, but one of the most interesting bits of advice I got from a RPG writer was that he was of the opinion that a writer should work out how magic works in universe, in their world, like what it entails, and then try to work out a system.
Mhm.
Which I thought was a approach with legs, but
Yeah, I think that's good, but then again, a problem with a lot of, let's say, novel based magic systems is that novels rarely have to worry about character balance in the same way, since the author has perfect control over whether a magical or non magical character gets the correct amount of screen time, whereas at a gaming table it can be more difficult. And often what you're trying to avoid is a sense of uselessness, which is difficult because uselessness is going to be a very subjective thing between players, and it's very easy to swing back the other way. Like one of the classic ways of trying to balance magic is, for example, giving it a failure chance. Either it requires a skill roll, or there's some chance if you're in a distracting environment, you'll have make a saving throw or something, or the classic old school question where um, casting spells happens at the end of a round, and if someone manages to poke you with a lawn dart before you cast your spell, you lose your spell.
yep.
And this is one of those things where, in theory, this is turnabout is fair play. And if a fighter can miss all of their attacks in a round, it shouldn't be too much of a problem for your wizard or your psychic to occasionally just start, having a nosebleed and forgetting their spells.
Hmm.
But it that this hasn't this hasn't this is probably the most successful of systems for balancing magic, is to make it harder. The issues come in where, like, have you set the difficulties right? Have you um have you accidentally made it too complex because it's using a slightly different system than the your core mechanic or the like. But it so there are still instances where it's wrong. One that came to mind for me was, remember when we had armor failure chance.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
third
where
edition anyway. I can't. Was that in fourth edition as well in D&D?
no, they just had a proficiency thing, I believe it was. Well, yeah, basically, original D&D had this idea. Well, if you're wearing armor, you can't cast spells unless you're a cleric.
Mm.
But then uh, third edition tried to make it slightly fairer by having each type of armor have a percentage chance of causing you to lose your spells. And these kinds of incidental, if you're, standing one leg, or, or if there's a particularly, brisk wind, you have like a 20% chance to forget your spell. These kinds of incidental penalties are one of those things where you just forget them. You just forget, you should have had to make 3 rolls in that case because of 3 different distractions. Um, and but we've already blown up the end boss of the game and started looting his pockets, so I think it's a bit too late to go back and introduce those penalties now. Yeah, this is the things like if you're going to be adding in these sort of little inconveniences, in the heat of the moment, the GM will just forget them. Now, if you have like a robust, like skill based mechanic or something, that's easier to remember because essentially for these kinds of things, if you're doing something, if you're rolling a dice to do something, people remember to do it. But if you're rolling a dice to see if something doesn't happen, that's when people tend to forget. And these kind of incidental failure chances are like that kind of forgetful thing, because people will focus on the I want to do X, and the you can't do X because of these little things. That's not where their mind's at. Their mind is at the task of doing X. So you're better off with a system where, say, oh, my casting roll has a penalty of -2 because of the frogs climbing up my trousers, as opposed to frogs climbing up your trousers causes a 20% spell failure chance.
Mm.
And that's sort of where the problem comes in for something that doesn't have a skill system, like we're probably going to be referring to this a lot, something like D&D, where by default spells are automatic, but there's this expectation that incidental penalties will creep in under under unusual circumstances, but GM sort of has to kind of go against the flow of their own game if they want to sort of introduce those kinds of penalties.
Not necessarily, I think, because if you have a world where magic is anyway known, as in if it's not a complete secret, clever people are going to think, okay, there are magic users out there, wizards and clerics and whatnot, and they are going to try, and some of them are going to try to interfere with my plans. How can I stop them? What are their vulnerabilities? Can I hire some of my own to counter them? Can I learn it myself? Maybe this necromancy might help me stock up my army.
Maybe. But that's sort of an in-universe response to things as opposed to a mechanical balance feature.
Sure.
And yeah, absolutely. Like, here's the thing. For suffering GMs, if your problem is that uh, unchallenged wizards are just destroying your elaborate goblin armies, maybe add in some more anti-magic opposition. I'm D&D is not D&D and its ilk is not short of monsters designed specifically to mess with wizards. And you can probably find stats for any of them on the homebrew 5e or whatever system you're using. websites. Like I'm pretty sure you can find spell rebounding imps and various golems immune to magic and all sorts of stuff like that to spice up the action and maybe give those goblins a fair shake for once. But yeah, at the moment, this is really more about balancing, on a mechanical level, and if it's really, I think actually though this. It's also the problem of some of these can seem very arbitrary. Like people could say, "Oh yeah, there are a whole bunch of frogs crawling up monsters." That probably is very distracting and makes it hard to say, Shabadoo, Ding Dong, and all that. But it's stuff.
I mean,
Go ahead.
excuse me. Distractions like that could happen. No, you just thought of something that you have. Like Fifth Ed has its wild mage with the wild magic table. But that's sorcerer. I believe that's a sorcerer archetype.
Yeah.
But there are other related systems that, or semi-related systems that have magical consequences, like dark and dangerous magic tables of low fantasy gaming, or the various effects of Dungeon Crawl Classics.
Mm-hmm.
So being a mage is great until it isn't, and something backfires. Not necessarily fatal or anything, just inconvenient.
Yeah, I've seen tables like that in many a place, and they're interesting, particularly if you are trying to, if this is again the sort of flavor your setting style thought, where these are suggesting dark and gritty settings where magic is an unpredictable chaotic force and cannot be truly controlled by players. So in those kind of situations it's appropriate. But if you're in a, let's call it a noble bright setting, having where heroes are heroes and they fight against the darkness, having a system where your mage can, on their very first spell, roll badly and get mutated into Goat Man, or the like. That could seem a bit out of genre, and you know, so it's a solution, yes, but it is a solution that may not always suit the type of game you're trying to run. There's the other problem, and this is maybe a bit more of a player problem, but there's always a chance you get a player who really who doesn't so much want to cast magic as cast the dark and dangerous magic table. Um, the
Hmm.
wild magic sorcerers some can attract a certain breed who the wild is part of the appeal over the regular spellcasting, and that again might suit the tone of the game you're trying to run. But if you're trying to do something more serious or very tactical, and everyone pulling their weight in a difficult combat encounter situation, having one player who can just randomly spawn 1,000 imps or cause a start raiding honeydew.
Yeah, it certainly changes things up very quickly.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, you can have these things can be solutions if your system and your setting will be proper. They'd be appropriate for it. There is another element of I call it character cost. Like the where casting spells causes a sort of uh more permanent problem. You have your sort of mutation tables or corruption tables in some games where um uh casting spells will sort of build up let's say a bad vibes meter. Um But I've seen in other places. There's a game. Oh, I can't remember the name. It's one of the Pelgrane Press Gumshoe games. Swords the Serpentine. That's it.
Okay.
So it's 13, where it's sort of a gumshoe system, where you have a certain number of points to invest in a given situation, in a given adventure, and they have a system for magic, but it's a system where doing anything other than the most basic magic, you have to. There are corruption points, and if you get corruption points by casting a spell, you have to either cause it to warp the environment around you or internalize it and cause you to mutate.
Ah.
And that's a flavorful game, particularly for the sort of Conan-esque pulp thing.
Oh yeah.
If you're trying to be, Elric of Melibde, and let's just say he may not, he doesn't certainly doesn't mutate into a goat man, but he goes through the ringer whenever he's trying to use too much of his magic and ends up
Hmm.
making all kinds of promises to all types of demon lords that he really shouldn't.
Yeah. It's entertaining though. For the
Yeah,
sounds of it.
but if you're having a situation of every time some cast a spell, it gives them that much closer to being turned into a horrible pile of flesh, or bringing down the judgment of God upon them. You suddenly need to start factoring in campaign life span into it, because the default for most people, without an unexamined default that I'll probably bring up in another episode, is that all games are infinite and they're expected to be playing the same character for the rest of their lives, even unexamined assumptions and all that. But
Hmm.
people feel really, really weirded out by this idea that, oh, a given character may only be able to cast 5 spells an entire adventure, or may only be able to cast 30 spells in their entire career or something. And
I would argue that makes the magic more meaningful, though, as in it's a real choice,
oh,
as it
absolutely,
big
absolutely.
dramatic moment, as opposed to I cast whatever.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with you, but this is again maybe a point I'm going to bring up in another episode again. But people sort of default assumption is that if they're a wizard, they're going to be doing magic constantly, and there's extra work involved if you're trying to get someone in the mindset that no, most of the time they're just a really smart guy in the back talking about interplanar politics and the price of bat guano.
Hmm.
And then every once in a while they're going to crack out a spell that's going to be a big deal, that's going to alter the world and alter them. Yeah, so like there's if you're going to be in that mindset, you need to onboard it. That's, for example, why it's more appropriate for something like Warhammer, the Warhammer 40k, Warhammer Fantasy games. Those entire settings put in major work into um, talking about the threat of chaos, the unpredictability of the warp, and how everyone is sort of doomed anyway. So
Fits
uh,
the campaign theme.
yeah, and so that there's a huge amount of work done to make sure. Oh well, these characters probably aren't going to make it to ascension ranks. So yeah, it's appropriate um, if Bimbo the Psyker accidentally gets 50 points of corruption and has a small horse growing out of their arms,
Hmm.
or whatever. But yeah, that's the thing, is like as a default solution, that kind of let's call it meaningful spellcasting has a bit of an uphill battle to justify itself.
Hmm.
Um, some of the others I have written out here. Spell components were one of those things.
Yeah, even even fifth edition, which like like it's still pretty friendly to casters. It still retains spell components for some of the particularly powerful spells. If
Yeah.
like either expendable components or expensive components or both when it comes to some of the more luscious bits of magic.
Yeah. I like spell components because they have this very interesting way of making magical more flavorful. Where often um, often magic in your D&D codes can seem very overly convenient. Having spell components in your game can add back in the uh a level of, oh, this is an arcane ritual. This is there must be hand gestures and there must be unspeakable words, and also you must hold up 3 copper coins that have been blessed by um, a naiad on a Tuesday, and they spark into nothingness, and that's what causes the spell to happen. That kind of thing, can add an awful lot of flavor to e- a set of magic. But again, it runs into this problem where people are sort of expected to be casting magic constantly, and thus having I pull out the 3 blessed copper coins and I say Shabadoo Ding Dong and make the sign of the horns, and you know if it's some people do not want to do this every time they just cast magic missile to kill a goblin. Their expectation is that it's too much effort to put into a what they perceive as a mundane task, and I think this is where you're going to get a lot of the flavor versus mechanics people's having their knife fights online. Is there's the flavor aspect of, yes, magic is magic. It is a impossible sorceress ability. It undoes reality, etc., etc. Versus the, I just want to shoot the goblin with a laser.
Yeah, it's again expectations.
But components have their other problems, and that is these are components are sort of, they fall into the idea of stuff that you're meant to prep, or that you're meant to do. It's sort of it's trying to engage with what we call the wizard tower archetype, like the idea that in order to be a sorcerer, magic user, psychic, whatever, you have to go off into your sanctum sanctorum and prepare a whole bunch of stuff with your bubbling cauldrons and you know pestle and mortar, and with made of gold and ivory and all these elaborate things. But an awful lot of play has defaults to what we call a fun spontaneity, where the time between the party getting together to adventure and them deciding, hey, let's go 3 towns over and annoy the mayor there because we heard he was racist to an orc once. Element of thing, like, where that kind of spontaneity of play, people have found to have an advantage in their session running, and it sort of runs counter to this idea that, apprentice wizards are supposed to be either going back to their master wizards to borrow the spell preparation desk, or they're going to have to pay extra at the inn to, use the back room to get all their powders in order. There's also, the eternal problem. Again, the similar issue of the forgettable penalty, where, I have to use all these chemicals that I have in my pouch to create this fireball. Have you been wading through the swamp of devastation for the last half hour? Shouldn't those be soaked? Shouldn't they be unusable? Well, I've already cast the fireball, so it's a bit too late to be imagining it didn't happen now. Again, it's this element of practicality that you don't think about because it's a sort of penalty on an action, and the focus of play at the table tends to be on the real results of the action, not the 1,000 niggling details of if you're waiting for this bomb, it'll probably destroy your spell components, etc., etc.
Can come up, but yes, it's not necessarily something people are going to think of.
It's something you kind of have to train yourself to think of. As something can you get yourself into that Gygaxian mindset where he was always looking for oversights in what his players has done, and making little notes in his marginalia, so that when they did pull out their bat guano and just say, your spell fails completely because all of your components are wet because you did X, Y, and Z. And because he was Gary Gygax, he could always win these arguments, but the poor starter GM who, goes 30 minutes after the fact, goes, wait a minute, how were we able to do that fireball on that giant? Wasn't all your stuff wet? And then, the different mindset made basically a different jamming styles would make that sort of thing less effective as a mechanical penalty, as it were. So this is why we say it in terms of certain GMs are lazy or they're not remembering their mechanics properly. It's that the mechanic is set up in this sort of notice it before it happens style system, which doesn't gel with every type of person, and therefore its usefulness as a balancing mechanic is very dependent on the person running it. Whereas a sort of more active system like a skill roll, if you will, that's more universally usable. The final one. Do you want to talk about? We could talk about casting time.
That could be that could certainly be an issue. Like say older editions of D&D, a single hit point of damage. There was no concentration roll or anything like that. It was the spell's cancelled. Spell's gone. So a perfectly valid response to a mage casting, whether friendly or not, was to chuck lawn darts at them, or just slash them with a sword or what have you. But some, like, depending on the system, some or the specific spell, even if interruption isn't an issue, the sheer length of time might be. Like if there's a ritual that takes 10 minutes to get off, then either that's not happening in combat, or that's a narrative thing where the rest of the parties try to hold off the horde while the mage is desperately trying to get the ritual going, and maybe it'll go wrong, and there'll be interesting consequences. Another balancing method that comes to mind is the quite flexible casting system from games like the White Hack, where the actual magic system is pages are quite short, but it somewhat offloads the balancing to a conversation between GM and player, which is an option. I GMs aren't necessarily game designers, neither are players, but if people are up for it, that's fine. There is a suggested list of costs, but oh yes, the costs are hit points. If you want to cast, you're literally bleeding for it.
Yeah.
Um, like the magic is going to hurt you, and and if I recall correctly, it can't be magically healed, so that loophole's out. You're going to have to get back that health over time. So magic it's as powerful as it is in any offshoot of D&D, but it could end you if you're not paying, if you keep using it.
Yeah. Negotiation based magic is an interesting one. Where certain systems have sort of decided that the best way for GM balancing is to leave everything sort of narrative and allowing a GM and a player to come to an agreement on what the effective spell should be. And also, if it has a certain failure chance or a certain difficulty or a cost, as you say. The issue there is, well, again, this is more a GM style issue, is that some GMs will love this idea because they can back and forth with their players to come up with solutions. Some GMs will recoil like a vampire from a cross made of garlic because they know they have players who will argue them into the dirt about every single aspect of a spell, and it will be an endless shouting match every time they pick up the dice. And then there are players who will object to this because they're not big fans of having the wizard's turn take 10 minutes or 20 minutes because there has to be a contract negotiation with every single spell's cast. A problem which can happen with many a magic system, just if the effects are particularly complex or there's a particularly weird situation, but a setup which guarantees this kind of dramatic back and forth, unless you're any more narrative system like uh, Powered by Apocalypse or Dungeon World, where even a fighter's violence move is expected to have a certain amount of back and forth. That I'm doing this and doing that. Oh, maybe this isn't the damage move. Maybe this is the intimidation move, but it looks like damage. Um. So yeah. I guess one of the things we're saying is that the problem with some of these solutions is not that they're bad; it's that they don't work for everyone. If you're say the most popular RPG in the planet, your balancing solutions need to come with a certain level of universality that everyone can agree on, and yeah, that's sort of the issues. Like if you're making an indie RPG or your own homebrew version of the game to fit your cool setting, absolutely fine. But if you're the biggest RPG in the planet, you need to have something something a bit more reliable. One last one was, and this is the maybe the most esoteric of all, but people were trying to use in-setting penalties to try to balance magic. Something which rarely works in your dungeon crawlers, but it certainly like maybe in Wolfrup, where maybe it's just not legal to cast magic, and
or certain magic. I like say, especially in a domain level game, or where players end up as rulers, they could decide to ban certain types of magic, like say enchantment, mind affecting magic. Gets forbidden because, well, that messes with people's free will.
Maybe. But yeah, like so again, social using sort of in-game social faux pas as your um as your main tool for balancing. I have a fireball that can destroy 1,000 ogres, but fire is bad in the city, so I shouldn't be using it.
Well, yeah, no, it is certainly one I do come back to a bit, because I do love me some verisimilitude in my games as a
Yeah,
rule. Not always. Sometimes things get faster and looser, but if PCs are blowing up stuff with, say, fireballs in a city, there's going to be a response. Like, otherwise most settings just aren't going to make sense for me.
yeah. It's one of those things where it's it's again it's a very subjective thing where some people, if you put that in, yeah, it adds the realism. Obviously, they have ways around this. For others, however, it can really gel the flow, and you always want to be careful of the problem where, oh, mighty adventurers, we're so overstretched. We need you to go into the goblin pits and defeat these 5 leprous goblins, please, things. And then the players, just cause a sinkhole and collapse half the city, and all of a sudden the town guards are full of SWAT teams, each with 3 wizards to take them down with. And why weren't these guys? Where were these guys when they were having goblin problems?
Yeah, it does raise questions, but to be fair as well, a setting can change, and sometimes it changes the way of, oh dear lord, we need some way to counter these insane adventures.
Yeah,
Who are going, who are and what, players can get the satisfaction of making changes to the world. Maybe not changes they want, but
yeah. Part of it is going to be your. Do you want the players to be engaging in shenanigans, um, or to get around these things? Like? I'm thinking of something like Mage for wife for World of Darkness, where there's this mechanical thing of paradox, and as a result, when a mage casts a spell, they have to figure out a way of making it look like it makes sense, or teleport to another dimension between dimensions, and where magic has no limits or whatever.
hmm.
But you see what I was saying is like, um, if your playstyle is in that sort of mindset of, oh, every spell I'm going to cast, I'm going to hide it somehow. Some players, when they're particularly crafty mood, can come out with all kinds of interesting nonsense. Where, but we're going to pretend our wizard is actually just a king from another thing, and put him in a not pagoda, the sedan, the
Oh, Planquin.
yeah, we're gonna put him on like a carried thing, and oh, you can only ever see his eyes because that is the culture of their people. But actually, it's so that the wizard can do all their hand gestures and magic words without being seen. Or if you're in the mood for that kind of elaborate nonsense, that could be fun. And it could also be fun if you are deliberately playing around with um, elaborate legal codes, and the whole point is that, much like the state has a monopoly of violence in most cases, but there's violence people still happens. The state may very well have a monopoly on magic, but there's still a demand for non-state magic to happen. So that is definitely putting your players in the role of subversive mercenaries. And if you hadn't been thinking of that, maybe this is why you're in the Adventurers Guild, because otherwise you're not a licensed mage. And yeah, these are cool. These are cool in-universe reasons to happen, but are they universally applicable to all games? Then again, you may all things should be all things to all people.
No, they shouldn't.
Yeah, so this is the problem: is you're trying. Can you fix all these problems with magic at the game design level, or do they need to be fixed at the GM level, as it were? And that's once again an eternal life fight on the internet. But yeah, I think we've cooked up some interesting rituals of complication for the magical arts, and yeah, once again, it's sounding like the solution is to figure out what you're actually running and figure out will your players be okay with you making it impossible for them to win every round as a free action.
Oh, that's a question.
Yeah, but if you would like to nerf our magical ability to podcast to you and bring us into line to your vision of a perfect fantasy podcast, you can hit us up on your social media. But for now, this party's over.
Thank you for listening to The Adventuring Party. If you'd like to leave us a voicemail, you can head on over to SpeakPipe and drop us a line. Or you can join us on our Discord server, where we keep the party going after hours. Otherwise, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Twitter, or you can email the hosts at party@theadventuringparty.net. The Adventuring Party is released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike version 3 license, but you probably knew that already. We hope you enjoyed the episode, and look forward to seeing you back here next week. Goodbye.